I'm sure you know about these mobile game ads which show a game that looks super fun, but when you actually download it, the game is completely different. These are so common that I even ran into one while I was making this video. The thing is, the ads always make the game look fun, but when you download it, it's just not the same. My little brother said to me that if the games were actually like the ads, then he'd play them, which gave me an idea to make a game that actually plays how the ads look. The first thing I did was create a new Unity project and add this platform that the game takes place on. I added a checkers texture to it so that it looks a little nicer than just the white floor. Then I added I don't even know what to call this thing, I'll just call it a unit for this video. Anyway, this unit follows the mouse around on the platform. The problem is right now there's only one unit, and I wanted the aim of the game to be to get as many units as possible and then for them to fight an enemy at the end of the level. So I tried adding some more in and getting them all to move towards where the mouse is. This worked way better than I thought it would, which was great. And as you can see, it works fine even with lots of units, so I created a way to spawn and despawn these units just to test the game. Now that the player's movement was done, I wanted to add in some obstacles for the player to avoid or purposely get hit by. Normally the way these games work is the obstacles will come towards the player, which can either add or take away from the amount of units they had. So I added in the first obstacle, a wall that either adds or takes away from the player's units when it's touched, and if it's shot at, the amount of units it gives increases. This way the player can choose to avoid it entirely, or they can shoot at it to give it more units when it's run into. For this to work properly, I added in some bullets that the player can shoot at the wall with, so I made a bullet that spawns in on each unit every second. This means that the more units the player collects, the more bullets they can shoot. And as you can see, when I run into one of these walls, the number of units that the wall had will spawn in. Then I wanted to add in these obstacles that have a health bar, and when they are destroyed, they can increase how fast the player can shoot. I also wanted them to kill any units that touched it. This wasn't too hard to add since I could just copy most of the code from the first obstacle. I just had to make it get destroyed when it runs out of health, and for it to increase the player's fire rate when it got destroyed. The final obstacle I wanted to add was a wall that covered the player's path, and each side had a multiplier which could either add or remove units from the player, depending on which side was touched. Again, I just reused most of the code from the last two obstacles. I just had to make it multiply the player's units rather than add to it. I wanted to add in enemy soldiers to fight the player at the end of each level, so I created a new object that when spawned in would move towards the player and would attack them when it got close. I had to add in aiming abilities for the player's units so that when the enemy got close, they would get shot at, instead of the player just shooting like normal. Right now the game was working fine, but there wasn't any way to play it indefinitely and there was no level generation or anything. But before I added that in, I wanted the game to look a bit nicer since right now it looks pretty bad, even worse than some of the actual mobile games out there. So the first thing I worked on was new models for the obstacles. I created this spiky roller thing that I added into the game, and I also added this fade effect to the walls so they look a bit nicer. I added in some UI on the top of the screen to show how many units the player had as well as the fire rate. The reason they have white squares behind them right now is because I wanted to add in proper images later to show what they are actually indicating to the player. I wanted to make my game have automatically generated levels, so I added in a script that spawns obstacles randomly, then it spawns in a giant enemy horde right at the end of the level for the player to face off against. However, there was a problem. The game would seriously start lagging when too many enemies spawned in, and that lag would be even worse on a phone. So I added in different tiers of units that the player could get: small, medium and large. The medium unit deals 10 times more damage than the small unit, and it has 10 times the health. The large unit is the same, it deals 10 times more damage than the medium unit. Whenever the game needs to spawn in 10 or more units, it just spawns in a larger one which does the same amount of damage. I also created the same system for the enemy units just to reduce lag even more. Here's what the final game looks like. I added in some icons on top of the screen to show what the UI means and to make it look nicer. Anyway, thanks for watching until the end of the video, and if you liked it and you want to see more like this, then subscribe. If this video gets 10,000 likes, then I'll polish up the game and put it on the App Store and the Play Store, but there's no way that'll happen. But if you want to prove me wrong, then go ahead. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.